My name is Muhammad Ryan Hidayat, and this is my video of my project 2 for subject social linguistics. And in the project 2, I will do two parts. In the first part, I will do a presentation with selected topics, and in the part 2, I will solve 7 case studies. And in the part 1, I choose the topics gender exclusive speech and stereotypes. First, I will do a presentation about the gender exclusive speech first. Definition of gender exclusive speech. Gender exclusive speech refers to language features that are predominantly associated with one gender within a particular speech community. These features may include differences in vocabulary, grammar, politeness strategies, pronunciation, or communication style. In sociolinguistics, these differences are understood as a product of socialization and cultural expectations rather than biological differences. Holmes in An Introduction to Sociolinguistics, 2013. Robin Lakoff in Language and Woman's Place, 1975 argues that language reflects society's expectations of men and women, making gender an important social variable in language use. Next, the characteristic of gender exclusive speech. Gender exclusive speech has several characteristics that distinguish it from other types of language variation. First, it reflects cultural norms about how men and women are expected to communicate. Second, it varies across societies because gender roles differ from one culture to another. Finally, these linguistic patterns are dynamic and may change as social values evolve. Holmes, in An Introduction to Sociolinguistics, 2013, explained that gender differences in language should be viewed as tendencies rather than fixed categories because communication is also influenced by age, education, occupation, and social context. Next, its key concept. 3 concepts are essential to understanding gender exclusive speech. First, language reflects social identity. People use language to express who they are and how they relate to others. Second, gender is socially constructed. According to West and Zimmerman in research paper entitled Doing Gender, 1987, gender is something people do through everyday interaction, including language. Third, language changes over time. Cameron, 2007, in research paper entitled The Myth of Mars and Venus, Do Men and Women Really Speak Different Languages?, argues that modern societies increasingly challenge traditional gender norms, causing communication styles to become more flexible. Next, Robin Lakoff's theory. Robin Lakoff's Language and Women's Place, 1975, is one of the earliest works in language and gender studies. Lakoff argued that women are socialized to use language that is more polite, emotionally expressive, and supportive, while men are generally expected to communicate more directly and assertively. Lakoff identified several features of women's language, including hedge, kind of, maybe, take question, isn't it, super polite form, expressive, adjective, and the avoidance of strong swear words. She argued that these features reflect women's subordinate social position rather than natural linguistic differences. Next, gender exclusive speech in digital communication. Although Lakoff developed her theory before the rise of the internet, her ideas remain relevant in digital communication. Today, emojis function as part of language because they help express emotions, attitudes, and interpersonal relationships. Research by Herring and Dinas in 2017, entitled Nice Picture Comment, graphic counts in Facebook comment threads suggest that gender differences continue to appear in online communication, although they are often less pronounced than in face-to-face interaction. Emojis can therefore be analyzed as linguistic resources that contribute to meaning. And next, here's the example of the gender exclusive speech. I took these examples from Winda Basudara's Instagram post comment that is posted in December 15, 2025. These comments were selected because both users respond to the same Instagram post with the same communicative purpose, expressing admiration and support. However, They use different language styles and emoji choices, making them suitable examples for analyzing gender-exclusive speech. This analysis uses Lakhov's theory as a framework while recognizing that individual language use varies according to context. Next, I will analyze the female comment. First, the female commenter writes a relatively long message expressing gratitude, admiration, and personal feelings. She thanks the creator for giving her opportunity to meet him and describes the experience as a dream come true. She also uses emojis such as a pink heart and like sprinkles and stars, which emphasize affection, appreciation, and emotional closeness. Although Lakoff did not discuss emojis, these expressive symbols can be interpreted as a digital extension of emotional language, which Lakoff associated with women's communication style. And here's the male comment analysis. The male commenter expresses support in a shorter and more direct way by saying, "Sukses terus Bang Winda." He uses fire emoji, clapping hand, and like standing ovation hand to emphasize admiration and encouragement. Compared to the female comment, the message contains fewer personal details and focuses on motivating the creator. The style reflects Lakoff's observation that men are often expected to communicate more directly and confidently. Why do these examples represent gender-exclusive speech? Both commenters share the same communicative goal, yet they achieve it through different linguistic choices. The female commenter emphasizes emotional connection and gratitude, while the male commenter emphasizes encouragement and admiration. These differences illustrate how gender can influence communication styles. However, they should be interpreted as a general sociolinguistic tendencies rather than universal characteristic of all men and women. Comparing the two comments by similarity, both comments express admiration, support, and encouragement. They use positive language and emojis to reinforce their messages. And for the differences, the female comment is longer, more descriptive, and emotionally expressive. The male comment, on the other hand, is shorter, more direct, and uses emojis associated with excitement and achievement, such as fire emoji. These differences illustrate contrasting communication strategies while serving the same social function. Sociolinguistic implication. From a sociolinguistic perspective, this comment suggests that gender may influence how people express emotions and social relationships online. Women may be more likely to use language that emphasizes interpersonal connection, while men prefer language that conveys confidence or encouragement. Nevertheless, Cameron 2007 argues that gender differences should not be treated as fixed or universal because communication is shaped by many social factors including culture, personality, age, and digital communities. Conclusion. For the conclusion, this analysis demonstrates that gender-exclusive speech can also be observed in digital communication. Although both commenters express the same intention, they choose different words and emojis to convey their support. Lakhov's theory helps explain these patterns by showing how language reflects social expectations about gender. At the same time, contemporary sociolinguists remind us that these patterns are flexible and should be understood as tendencies rather than absolute differences. And here are the references that I use for the topic one. You can see. Next, I will do a presentation for the topic 2. There is stereotypes. First, definition of stereotypes. Stereotypes in sociolinguistics are widely recognized beliefs or attitudes about a particular language, variety, accents, or dialect. Unlike general social stereotypes, linguistic stereotypes focus specifically on how people evaluate the way others speak. These evaluations are often based on social perceptions rather than objective linguistic facts. According to William Leboeuf in Sociolinguistic Pattern 1972, linguistic stereotypes are language features that members of a speech community consciously recognize and associate with certain social meanings. These stereotypes influence how speakers and listeners perceive different accents and dialects. Characteristic of linguistic stereotypes. Linguistic stereotypes have several important characteristics. First, they are based on people's perception rather than linguistic evidence. Second, they attach social meanings such as intelligence, friendliness, prestige, or professionalism to particular accent or dialects. Finally, they vary across cultures and communities because attitudes toward language are shaped by society. Peter Tragel, 2000, in Sociolinguistics, An Introduction to Language and Society, explained that no dialect or accent is linguistically superior to another. Instead, society assigns prestige or stigma to different language varieties. Key concept. The three key concepts help explain linguistic stereotypes. Language attitudes refer to people's opinions and evaluation of particular accents or dialects. These attitudes influence how speakers are judged in education, employment, and everyday communication. Language ideology refers to shared beliefs about what is considered good, correct, or prestigious language. Finally, social meaning explains that language conveys more than information. The way someone speaks can signal identity, education, religion, or social status. Together, these concepts show that language is not only a communication system, but also a social symbol. William Leboeuf's theory. William Leboeuf introduced the concept of indicators, markers, and stereotypes in sociolinguistics. He defined linguistic stereotypes as language features that are widely recognized by society and often become the basis for social judgment. Leboeuf argued that these stereotypes do not necessarily reflect linguistic quality. Instead, they reflect people's attitudes toward the social groups associated with particular language varieties. For example, listeners may associate one accent with intelligence and another with friendliness, even though both are equally valid forms of English. Next, linguistic stereotypes in online communication. Social media has become a space where people openly express their attitudes toward different accents and dialects. Comment sections on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram often contain evaluation of the way people speak rather than the content of what they say. This online interaction provides authentic examples of linguistic stereotypes because users associated accents with social characteristics such as elegance, intelligence, friendliness, or professionalism. Here are the examples. I took the example from the YouTube short video entitled American versus British English Pronunciation that was uploaded by Speakeasy in August 11, 2025. The video compares the pronunciation of several English words in British and American English. Among the comments, two were selected because they clearly express people's attitudes toward the two accents. Although these comments are short, they reveal how people associate with different social qualities with different accents. Here's the analysis of the first comment. The first commenter states that British accent is more elegant. Rather than describing pronunciation, this comment assigns a social value to the British accent by associating it with religion and sophistication. According to William Leboeuf in Sociolinguistic Pattern 1972, stereotypes are socially marked forms. In other words, linguistic stereotypes are language features or varieties that people consciously recognize and evaluate according to social beliefs rather than linguistic facts. The adjective elegant reflects a common stereotype associated with received pronunciation or RP, which has historically been viewed as prestigious and linked to higher social status in Britain. Therefore, the comment demonstrates how an accent can acquire symbolic meaning beyond its linguistic characteristics. Here's the analysis of the comment 2. The second commenter writes that American one sounds casual. Similar to the first example, the adjective casual does not describe pronunciation or grammar, but instead express a social perception of American English. Leboeuf, 1972, explains that linguistic stereotypes arise because members of a speech community consciously associate particular language varieties with certain social characteristics. In this case, the American accent is associated with informality, friendliness, and everyday conversation. From a sociolinguistic perspective, this judgment reflects people's attitudes toward the language variety rather than any objective linguistic difference between American and British English. Why do these examples represent linguistic stereotypes? These comments represent linguistic stereotypes because they assign social characteristics to accent rather than describing their actual linguistic features. As Leboeuf 1972 explains in Sociolinguistic Patterns, linguistic stereotypes are socially recognized language features that carry social evolution. The words elegant and casual are examples of these evaluations. They reveal how listeners associate British English with prestige and formality, while American English is associated with informality and everyday communication. Importantly, these judgments are based on public perception rather than linguistic evidence. Sociolinguistics Sociolinguists such as Rajil 2000 argue that no accent is inherently better or more correct than another. Differences in practice result from social attitudes, not linguistic quality. Comparing the comments. Comparing the comments by similarity. Both comments evaluate English accent instead of individual speakers. They use adjectives to describe social qualities rather than linguistic features, showing that language varieties often carry symbolic meanings. Differences. The British accent is described as elegant, suggesting sophistication, prestige, and formality. In contrast, the American accent is described as casual, suggesting friendliness, informality, and everyday communication. Although the evaluation differ, both comments demonstrate how people associate accents with particular social identities. Pattern of language use. The comment reveals a pattern of language attitudes in which listeners evaluate accents using social descriptors rather than linguistic terminology. Neither commenter discusses pronunciation, grammar, or vocabulary. Instead, they focus on perceived social characteristics such as elegance and casualness. This pattern demonstrates that people's judgment about language are closely connected to their belief about society and identity. Next is the sociolinguistic implication. This example illustrates how linguistic stereotypes influence the way people perceive the language and its speakers. Accents often become symbols of social status, education, personality, or professionalism, even though linguistic research shows that no accent is inherently better than another. Turkey 2000 argues that judgment about accent are social judgment rather than linguistic one. Therefore, describing British English as more elegant or American English as more casual reflects cultural perceptions rather than objective linguistic differences. Recognizing linguistic stereotypes helps us become more aware of language prejudice and encourages us to evaluate speakers based on what they communicate rather than how they sound. Next is conclusion. Linguistic stereotypes are social beliefs about accents, dialects, or language varieties. They influence how people perceive speakers and often affect communication in everyday life. The comments analyzed in presentation demonstrate how British and American accents are associated with different social meanings. Using Lebow's theory, this evaluation can be understood as linguistic stereotypes because they reflect public attitudes rather than linguistic reality. Ultimately, sociolinguistics remind us that all language varieties are linguistically equal, even though society may assign them different levels of prestige. And here's the reference that I use for the topic 2. Okay, and that's it for my part 1, and I will continue to the part 2. Okay, now I will do the part 2 for the project 2 social linguistic. It is solving the 7 case studies with the questions given. And let's get started. Let's start to the first case. The case is gender exclusive speech. A technology company is recruiting new employees. During an online meeting, the manager repeatedly says every employee must submit his report before Friday. A good programmer should improve his coding skills regularly. Several female employees feel that the language used excludes women and reinforces centered assumptions in the workplace. What is gender exclusive speech? Gender exclusive speech refers to language that excludes or underrepresents one gender by treating another gender as the norm. It commonly involves using masculine pronouns, for example, he and his, or gender-specific terms to refer to people in general. According to Janet Holmes in an introduction to Sociolinguistics 2013, language reflects social relationships and can reinforce social inequalities, including gender inequality. Therefore, language choices can influence how different groups are represented in society. Why can the manager's language be considered gender exclusive? The manager repeatedly uses the pronoun his. in statements such as every employee must submit his report before Friday. Although the manager may intend his to refer all employees, the repeated use of masculine pronouns suggests male employees are the default or typical members of the workplace. Research by Hamilton in 1988 entitled "Using Masculine Generics Does Generic He Increase Male Bias in the User's Imagery?" found that generically masculine pronouns often lead readers to imagine male rather than gender-neutral reference. Therefore, female employees may feel excluded because the language implicitly associates professional roles with men. What social and linguistic effects may result from such a language? Gender-exclusive language may have both social and linguistic consequences. Socially, it can reduce women's sense of inclusion, reinforce gender stereotypes, and contribute to unconscious bias in professional environments. Linguistically, it makes masculine forms appear to be the standard way to refer to all people. Selberg et al. 2007 reviewed studies on gender-fair language and concluded that inclusive language increases the visibility of women and reduces gender bias. This suggests that the manager's language may unintentionally reinforce male-centered assumptions with the company. What alternative language form could be used? The manager should use gender-inclusive language that represents all employees equally. For example, every employee must submit their report before Friday. Every programmer should improve their coding skills regularly. All employees must submit their reports before Friday. Using singular they or plural noun phrases avoid unnecessary gender assumptions while maintaining grammatical clarity. Holmes 2013 argued that inclusive language promotes equality and reflects changing social values, while the finding of Stabler et al. 2007 support the use of gender-fair language to create more inclusive communication. And here are the references that I use for solving the case 1 or the topic 1. Next is the case 2. The case is lecturer explains the same topic to students. Lecturer A says language is a system of communication. Lecturer B says language functions as a dynamic symbolic system facilitating the transmission and negotiation of meaning across diverse social-cultural contexts. Many students report that lecturer B's explanation is more difficult to understand because it contains a higher concentration of information. What is linguistic density? Linguistic density refers to the amount of information packed into a sentence or text. A text with high linguistic density contains many concepts, technical terms, or complex ideas within a relatively small number of words, requiring greater cognitive effort from the reader or listener. Conversely, lower linguistic density present information more directly and simply, making it easier to understand. According to M.A.K. Halliday 2004, linguistic density is a characteristic of academic and written language, where speakers or writers condense information using technical vocabulary and complex noun phrases. This enables efficient communication of specialized knowledge, but may also increase the difficulty of comprehension. How does density affect communication and comprehension? Linguistic density directly influences how easily listeners or readers understand a message. When language contains many technical terms and abstract concepts, the audience must process more information simultaneously, increasing cognitive demands. As a result, highly dense language may reduce comprehension, especially for learners or individuals who are unfamiliar with the topic. In this case, lecture-based explanation contains several abstract expressions such as dynamic symbolic system, summation, negotiation of meaning, and diverse social cultural contexts. Although academically accurate, these terms make the explanation more difficult for students to process than lecture A's simpler definition. Research by Crossley, Greenfield, and McNamara in 2008 found that texts with greater lexical sophistication and information density are generally more difficult to comprehend because they require readers to process more complex vocabulary and concepts simultaneously. And which lecturer uses higher linguistic density? Lecturer B uses significantly higher linguistic density. Lecturer A communicates the main idea using a short, straightforward sentence that contains only one central concept. Language is a system of communication. In contrast, lecturer B expresses multiple ideas within a single sentence by introducing specialized terminology and additional conceptual information. The explanation discusses language as a symbolic system, its function in transmitting and negotiating meaning, and its relationship to social cultural context. Halliday 2004 explains that academic discourse often achieves high information density through lexical density, meaning that more content words are packed into fewer grammatical structures. Therefore, lecturer B's explanation demonstrates a much higher level of linguistic density than lecturer A's. What are the advantages and disadvantages of dense language? Dense language offers several advantages. It enables speakers and writers to communicate large amounts of information efficiently and precisely, making it particularly useful in academic writing, scientific research, and professional communication. Specialized terminology also allow experts to discuss complex concepts with greater accuracy. However, dense language also has disadvantages. It may overwhelm listeners who lack sufficient background knowledge, reduce comprehension, and create communication barriers between experts and non-experts. In educational settings, overly dense explanation can decrease students' engagement because learners spend more effort interpreting vocabulary and understanding the main ideas. According to Snow 2010, effective academic communication requires balancing precision with accessibility. Educators should adjust the density of their language according to students' knowledge and learning needs to promote better understanding. And here are the references that I use for case 2 or topic 2. The next case is complexity. The case is the university website publishes the following announcement. The version A says students must submit the form by Friday, while the version B says students who have completed the registration process and fulfilled all administrative requirements are required to submit the form before the specified deadline. Many students find version B more difficult to process. What is linguistic complexity? Linguistic complexity refers to the degree of difficulty in a language structure, including its syntax, vocabulary, and sentence organization. A sentence is considered more complex when it contains multiple clauses, embedded structures, longer noun phrases, or advanced vocabulary requiring greater cognitive effort to understand. According to Jane Holmes 2013, language varies according to its communicative purpose and audience. Informal or institutional settings, speakers and writers often use more complex grammatical structures to achieve precision and completeness. However, excessive complexity may reduce clarity, particularly for readers who are unfamiliar with formal language. Which version demonstrates greater complexity? Version B demonstrates greater linguistic complexity. Unlike version A, which consists of one simple clause, version B contains a relative clause who have completed the registration process and fulfill all administrative requirements. Multiple pieces of information and more formal vocabulary such as administrative requirements, required, and specified deadline. These features make the sentence longer and syntactically more demanding. Research by Ortega 2003 shows that syntactic complexity increases as sentences contain more subordinate clauses and embedded grammatical structures. Therefore, version B requires readers to process more information before identifying the main message, making it more difficult to understand than version A. When is complex language appropriate? Complex language is appropriate when precision, completeness, and detailed explanation are necessary. It is commonly used in academic writing, legal documents, scientific publication, and official policy because these contexts require accurate and ambiguous communication. However, for general announcements, instruction, or public information, simple language is usually more effective because it ensures that readers can understand the message quickly and correctly. In the university announcement, version A would be more suitable because the primary goal is to communicate a deadline clearly rather than provide extensive detail. Holmes 2013 emphasizes that effective communication depends on selecting language that matches the audience and communicative purpose. Similarly, Ortega 2003 argues that increasing complexity does not necessarily improve communication. Instead, language should be appropriate for the needs and abilities of its intended audience. And these are the references that I use for the case 3. For the next case is style. The case is a student sends the following message to a professor. Hey prof, what's up? I need your signature. ASAP. The same student later writes, Good morning professor, I would like to request your signature on my academic form. Thank you for your assistance. The professor responds more positively to the second message. What is language style? The language style refers to the variation in language use depending on the speaker, audience, purpose, and social context. Speakers adjust their vocabulary, sentence structure, tone, and level of formality to suit different situations. In sociolinguistics, style reflects how individuals adapt to their language to achieve effective communication and maintain appropriate social relationships. According to Jenny Holmes 2013, language style varies according to factors such as a social distance, status, and the formality of the situation. Speakers naturally choose different styles when communicating with friends, colleagues, or people in position of authority. How do the two messages differ statistically? The two messages differ mainly in their level of formality, politeness, and tone. Message A uses informal expressions such as "Hey, prof, what's up?" and "As up." These expressions are common in conversation between close friends, but may sound too casual and demanding in communication with a professor. In contrast, message B uses polite greetings, complete sentences, and respectful expressions such as "I would like to request and thank you for your assistance." This formal style demonstrates respect for the professor's academic position and allows the conventions of professional communication. According to Bells in 1984 audience design theory, speakers adjust their language according to their audience. Since professors hold higher institutional status than students, formal language is generally more appropriate in academic communication. Why is the second message more appropriate? The second message is more appropriate because it matches the social relationship between a student and a professor. Academic communication requires politeness, professionalism, and respect, especially when making requests. The use of formal greetings, indirect requests, and expression of gratitude creates a positive impression and demonstrates awareness of academic etiquette. As a result, the professor is more likely to respond positively because the student acknowledges the professor or an authority. Research by Economy do Coget Series 2011 found that polite and indirect requests are generally perceived as more respectful in educational settings, leading to more positive interpersonal interaction. Therefore, message B is more effective because it combines clarity with politeness. How does style influence interpersonal relationship? Language style plays an important role in shaping interpersonal relationship because it communicates attitudes such as respect, friendliness, authority, and social distance. Choosing an appropriate style helps speakers build positive relationships, avoid misunderstandings, and achieve their communicative goals. In this case, the student's formal language in message-based strengthens the relationship with the professor by showing courtesy and professionalism. In contrast, the overly casual style in message may unintentionally appear disrespectful or inappropriate, even if the student's intention is simply to make a request. Holmes 2013 explains that appropriate language choices help maintain social harmony and reflect the norms of a particular community. Similarly, Bell 1984 argues that successful communication depends on adapting language to the audience and social context. And here are the references that I use for case 4. Next case is context. The case is during a classroom presentation, a student says the project is really sick. Some students interpret the statement as negative, while others understand it as meaning excellent or impressive. The lecturer asks the class why different interpretations occur. What is context in sociolinguistics? In sociolinguistics, context refers to the social, cultural, linguistic, and situational factors that influence how language is perceived and interpreted. The meaning of an utterance is not determined solely by the words themselves, but also by who is speaking, who is listening, where the interaction takes place, and the shared knowledge between participants. According to General Holmes 2013, language cannot be understood independently of its social context because speakers choose and interpret language according to the situation and the relationship between participants. Therefore, context plays a crucial role in determining the intended meaning of an expression. Why can the same expression have different meanings? The expression, this project is really sick, can have different meanings because many words have meanings that depend on context rather than their dictionary definition. Traditionally, the word sick means ill or unwell. However, in contemporary informal English, especially among younger speakers, sick is often used as slang to mean excellent, amazing, or impressive. In this case, students who are familiar with modern slang interpret the expression positively, while others rely on its traditional meaning and understand it as criticism. The differences arises because listeners draw on different linguistic experiences and cultural knowledge. Research by Tagliamonte and Roberts in 2005 shows that slang expressions frequently develop new meanings within particular speech communities. Understanding these meanings depends on whether speakers and listeners they share the same linguistic and cultural background. What contextual factors influence interpretation? Several contextual factors influence how the expression is interpreted. First, the social context matters because the statement is made during a classroom presentation where students may expect either praise or criticism. Second, the speaker's intention influences interpretation. If the speaker delivers the statement enthusiastically, listeners are more likely to understand it positively. Third, the cultural and generational background of the audience affect whether they recognize it as a modern slang. Finally, shared knowledge among participants help determine the intended meaning. According to Himes, 1974, communication is shaped by components such as the settings, participants, purpose, and norms of interaction. These contextual factors explain why different students interpret the same expression differently. How does context affect communication? Context helps speakers and listeners construct meaning beyond the literal definition of words. When participants share similar contextual knowledge, communication becomes more effective because intended meanings are understood correctly. However, differences in cultural background, age experience, or familiarity with slang may result in misunderstanding. In this case, students who recognize it as a positive slang expression correctly understand the speaker's compliment, whereas others interpret the statement literally and believe it expresses criticism. This demonstrates that successful communication depends not only on linguistic knowledge but also on contextual understanding. Holmes 2013 emphasizes that interpreting language requires considering the social situation in which communication occurs. Likewise, Tagliamonte and Roberts 2005 argue that the meanings of slang expression are socially constructed within particular communities and may not be shared by everyone. And here are the references that I use for the case 5. Next case is register. The case is a medical doctor writes the patient exhibits symptoms of hypertension and requires immediate pharmacological intervention. Later, while talking to the patient's family, the doctor says your family member has high blood pressure and needs medication soon. Both statements convey similar information but use different language varieties. What is registers? In sociolinguistics, registers refers to the variety of language used according to a particular situation, purpose, topic, and audience. Speakers choose different vocabulary, grammar, and level of formality depending on whom they are communicating with and the context of the interaction. According to M.A.K. Halliday in 1978, register is determined by three variables: field, the topic or activity; tenor, the relationship between participants; and mode, the channel of communication such as spoken or written language. These variables influence the linguistic choices speakers make in different communicative situations. Why does the doctor use different language in different situations? The doctor uses different registers because the two audiences have different levels of medical knowledge and different communication needs. When writing the medical record, the doctor uses technical terms such as hypertension and pharmacological intervention because the document is intended for healthcare professionals who require precise and standardized medical terminology. However, when speaking to the patient's family, the doctor changes to a more accessible register by saying high blood pressure and needs medication soon. This allows family members who may not have medical training to understand the patient's condition more easily. According to Halliday in 1978, speakers naturally adjust their register according to the field, tenor, and mode of communication. In this case, although the medical topic or field remains the same, the audience or tenor changes, requiring the doctor to modify the language accordingly. What factors influence register choice? Several factors influence register choice in communication. First, audience is one of the most important factors because speakers must consider the listener's background knowledge and level of expertise. Second, purpose affects register as professional documentation requires greater precision than everyday conversation. Third, setting influences language use because formal workplace communication often differs from casual interpersonal interaction. Finally, the topic itself determines whether technical vocabulary is necessary. Researcher by Bieber and Conrad 2009 explains that register variation occurs because speakers adapt language systematically according to communicative situations. Different contexts require different linguistic features to achieve effective communication. How does register affect communication effectiveness? Choosing an appropriate register improves communication by ensuring that information is both accurate and understandable. In this case, the technical register used in the medical record ensures professional accuracy and consistency among healthcare providers. While the simpler register used with the patient's family, improve comprehension, and reduce the risk of misunderstanding. If the doctor uses only technical terminology when speaking to the family, they might become confused or anxious because they would not fully understand the medical information. Holiday in 1978 argues that effective communication depends on selecting language that fits communicative situations. Similarly, Fang 2005 emphasizes that academic and technical language should be adapted when communicating with non-specialists to improve understanding without losing essential meaning. And here are the references that I use for case 6 or topic 6. Okay, for the last case or case 7 is stereotypes. The case is a company manager states during a meeting, women are naturally better at communication while men are naturally better at leadership. Several employees disagree and argue that such statements promote stereotypes rather than reflect individual abilities. What are linguistic and social stereotypes? Linguistic stereotypes are generalized beliefs about how particular groups of people speak or use language, while social stereotypes are overall simplified assumptions about the characteristic abilities or behaviors of members of a social group. These stereotypes are often based on gender, age, ethnicity, occupation, or social class rather than on individual differences. In this case, the manager assumes that women are naturally possess better communication skills and that men are naturally better leaders. These statements are examples of gender stereotypes because they attribute certain abilities to individuals solely based on their gender instead of evaluating them as individuals. According to Jenna Holmes 2013, language reflects social attitudes and beliefs. Through everyday communication, stereotypes can be reinforced and become accepted as social norms even when they are not supported by evidence. How can stereotypes be reflected and reinforced through language? Language reflects stereotypes when speakers repeatedly associate particular characteristics with certain social group. Statements such as women are naturally better at communication or men are naturally better leaders present these beliefs as universal truths rather than personal opinions. When such expressions are frequently repeated, they influence how people perceive themselves and others. Employees may begin to believe that leadership positions are more suitable for men or that communication-related roles are more appropriate for women, regardless of their actual abilities. Research by Carly et al. 2016 found that gender stereotypes continue to influence perception of leadership, with leadership qualities often being associated more strongly with men than women. Therefore, the manager's language reinforces existing stereotypes instead of recognizing individual competence. What are the potential consequences of stereotypes in professional environments? Gender stereotype can have significant negative consequences in the workplace. Employees may experience unequal opportunities for promotion, biased performance evaluations, or discrimination in hiring and leadership selection. Individuals who do not fit traditional stereotypes may also feel discouraged from pursuing certain career for or leadership roles. In this case, female employees may be viewed as better suited for communication-based tasks rather than leadership position, while male employees may face expectation to become leaders even if they possess different strengths, such as assumption, limit professional development, and reduce workplace diversity. According to Hellman 2012, gender stereotypes contribute to workplace bias by influencing how competence and leadership potential are evaluated. As a result, organizational decisions may be based on stereotypes rather than actual performance. How can language be used to reduce stereotypes? Language can reduce stereotypes by focusing on individuals' abilities, qualification, and achievement, rather than making generalizations based on gender or other social categories. Instead of saying women are naturally better at communication, a manager could say effective communication and leadership depend on individual skill, experience, and personal qualities. Organizations can also promote inclusive language by avoiding assumptions about gender roles using neutral expressions when discussing professional abilities. Home 2013 argues that language plays an important role in shaping social attitudes. Similarly, Carly et al. 2016 emphasized that reducing stereotypical language can help create more inclusive workplaces where opportunities are based on competence rather than gender. And here are the references that I use for case 7 or topic 7. So that's it, my video for the project 2 sociolinguistic. In the part 1 regarding do a presentation with selected topics, and in the part 2 regarding solving the 7 case studies. Thank you for watching.